A child's death that shattered the galaxy. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where the stars seemed dim and the planets far removed from the turmoil of the great galactic powers, there was a small, unassuming colony of humans. This was a world untouched by the grand ambitions of the Empire, a world where life was simple and quiet. Its people lived without the burden of galactic politics or the threat of interstellar war hanging over their heads. They grew crops, raised children, and nurtured their families in peace. But peace, as they would soon learn, was a fragile thing. It all began on one ordinary day when a young girl named Maya, no older than 10, was playing in the fields near her home. She had no idea that her life and the fate of her people were about to be changed forever. Maya had always loved the open fields. She would run barefoot through the tall grass, imagining she was an explorer charting unknown lands. The wind was calm that day, the sun warm against her skin, and the distant hum of the colony's small settlement was the only sound breaking the silence. Then the sky darkened. Massive shadowy ships appeared, blotting out the sun. They descended from the heavens with a deafening roar, their vast forms slicing through the atmosphere like falling stars. These were no ordinary ships. They were warships from the Empire, titans of destruction whose only purpose was to conquer and crush. The people of the colony had no defenses, no military might to protect themselves. There was no time to flee. The Empire had come. Chaos erupted as the black-clad soldiers of the Empire stormed the colony, their weapons raised high. The people, men, women, and children, had no way of fighting back. The Empire's ruthless tactics left no room for mercy. They had come to subjugate, to remind the humans that they were nothing in the face of the Empire's power. Amidst the panic, Maya ran toward her home, her small legs carrying her as fast as they could. She had heard the explosions, seen the fire and destruction, and she knew something terrible was happening. She was just a child, yet she understood enough to know that her world was ending. But as she turned a corner, a stray blast from the Empire's weapons struck her down. The explosion sent her flying, her body crumpling to the ground in a cloud of dust. The attack had been indiscriminate, and Maya, the innocent child, was nothing more than collateral damage in the Empire's quest for control. Maya's death was not an accident, it was not a mistake. It was a calculated act designed to send a message. Resistance would be met with brutality, and no one, not even a child, would be spared. Her death, though tragic, was also a spark that would ignite a fire across the galaxy. News of the attack spread quickly, and it didn't take long for word to reach Earth. What had happened on this quiet colony wasn't just the loss of one life. It was a direct assault on everything humanity stood for. It was a declaration of war. The human race, long underestimated by the Empire, would not stand idly by. Back on Earth, leaders gathered in secret, their hearts heavy with anger. How could the Empire murder an innocent child without a second thought? How could they be so cruel, so merciless? The question echoed in every leader's mind, stirring something deep within them. The leaders of Earth knew that retaliation was necessary, but it had to be something far beyond the Empire's expectations. If humanity fought back in the way the Empire anticipated, they would be crushed without mercy. But if they did something unexpected, something so powerful, so overwhelming, it could make the Empire rethink their strategy. And so the decision was made. Earth would not just send a few ships to fight. Earth would show the galaxy the true power of humanity. For the first time, Earth would reveal its hidden weapon, the Dreadnoughts. These were no ordinary ships. They were the largest and most powerful warships ever created by humanity, massive machines of destruction capable of laying waste to entire fleets with a single shot. But the Empire had no idea they existed. The Dreadnoughts had been built in secret, a symbol of humanity's strength, waiting for the day they would be needed. As Earth's fleet of Dreadnoughts began to assemble, the galaxy began to whisper. Rumors spread like wildfire, rumors of a weapon so powerful that even the mighty Empire would tremble. And with each passing day, the whispers grew louder. The launch was imminent. The countdown began. One by one, the dreadnoughts rose from Earth's surface. They were colossal, unstoppable machines, and their engines burned bright as they lifted into the void. Soon, a fleet of 500,000 dreadnoughts would be heading straight for the Empire. Humanity was no longer a passive spectator in the galaxy, no longer a weak, defenseless species. They had a message for the Empire. Maya's death was not a small thing. It was not a moment to be forgotten. Humanity would make the Empire pay, and they would do so in a way that would make the entire galaxy take notice. The first volley of humanity's wrath was about to be unleashed. The unstoppable march of humanity. The galaxy had always seen itself as a place of power struggles, where the strong dominated and the weak perished without a second thought. The Galactic Empire had long held the belief that humanity was a scattered, primitive species, a mere blip in the vast expanse of the stars. They had seen Earth's colonies as nothing more than small, insignificant settlements, ripe for conquest, but too weak to resist. They had been wrong. As the dreadnoughts rose from Earth's surface, their massive engines ignited in a blaze of fiery orange, propelling the ships into the depths of space. These were not mere warships, they were monuments to human ingenuity, born from the desire to protect their home and exact justice for the loss of one innocent life. The galaxy had never seen anything like them. News of the fleet's launch spread quickly through the galaxy. Every star system trembled as reports came in of Earth's unthinkable retaliation. The Empire, still reeling from the shock of Maya's death, had underestimated the resolve of humanity. They had thought the humans would cower in fear, that they would not dare to challenge the might of the Empire. But the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. The dreadnoughts were led by Admiral Hawk, a seasoned strategist whose calm demeanor masked the fury burning inside her. She had lost family in past conflicts, and now the death of one child, Maya's death, had become personal. This was no longer just a military operation. It was a mission of vengeance, of justice. Hawk's command was more than just a fleet. It was a symbol of humanity's will to survive, to protect, and to never be underestimated again. As the dreadnoughts left Earth's atmosphere, they formed an unbreakable formation, a massive armada of steel and fire that stretched across the stars. Each ship was manned by thousands of soldiers, engineers, and officers, all united in their mission. There was no room for hesitation, no space for second thoughts. Every crew member knew what was at stake: the future of humanity, the future of their families, and the fate of the galaxy. The dreadnoughts were a marvel of engineering. Each one was a self-sustaining fortress, equipped with state-of-the-art weapons and shields capable of decimating entire fleets. Their firepower was unrivaled. They could obliterate an enemy ship with a single volley, and their shields could withstand the most powerful blasts. For the Empire, they were an unimaginable threat, a force that could not be ignored. As the ships sped through space, leaving Earth behind, the enormity of the task ahead settled over Admiral Hawk. She stood at the command center of the lead dreadnought, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the path to the Empire's core. The galaxy was vast, and the journey would take days, but it didn't matter. Time was no longer a concern. The mission was clear: reach the Empire's strongholds and make them pay for the death of Maya. The crew was a mixture of civilians and veterans, people who had never fought in a war and those who had fought in countless battles. But they were united now, driven by one singular purpose. They would bring justice to the Empire, no matter the cost. In the cockpit of the dreadnought, the tension was palpable. The hum of the engines was the only sound, broken only by the occasional voice crackling through the comms. All systems green, Admiral, came the voice of Commander Mendez, her tone steady but laced with anticipation. Proceed as planned, Admiral Hawk replied, her voice firm and resolute. The fleet moved forward, leaving behind the peaceful life of Earth and heading into the unknown. As they journeyed through the void, the Empire's response was swift. Whispers of the human armada reached the Empire's leaders, And for the first time in centuries, they began to feel the sting of doubt. The once unshakable empire was now questioning its own strength. Could they defeat a force unlike any they had encountered before? As the Dreadnoughts continued their journey, the crew members prepared for the battle that was to come. Every ship was equipped with advanced weaponry, plasma cannons, ion disruptors, and shield-piercing missiles. The Empire's warships, despite their size and strength, would not stand a chance. The humans had made a promise. They would make the Empire pay for what they had done to Maya. But even as the fleet moved forward, Earth's leaders knew that this was just the beginning. Retaliation was inevitable, and they would face incredible challenges. The Empire was not an entity that would simply bend to human will. There would be resistance, and it would be fierce. Yet, for the first time in history, Earth was not alone. The news of Maya's death and humanity's subsequent response spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Rebellions and resistance groups, long suppressed by the Empire, began to stir. They saw what the humans were doing, standing up to the most powerful force in the galaxy, and they realized that they could too. Across star systems, ships were being prepared. Fighters, corvettes, and cruisers, small but mighty, began to form fleets of their own. These were not the mighty dreadnoughts, but they were something more powerful. They were symbols of resistance. Humanity had started something that could not be stopped, and now the galaxy was beginning to change. The Empire's reign was on the brink of collapse, and no one could predict how far humanity would go to make sure that Maya's death was not forgotten. The journey to the Empire's stronghold had only just begun, but the galaxy would never be the same again. The Empire's first taste of humanity's wrath. The journey to the Empire's strongholds was long, and yet, for those aboard the fleet of dreadnoughts, it felt as though time had become an enemy in itself. The vastness of space stretched before them like an endless sea, an ocean that seemed to swallow up all thoughts of what lay ahead. Yet, within the cold silence of space, a storm was brewing, one that would shake the Empire to its very core. As the fleet of 500,000 dreadnoughts moved ever closer to the Empire's territory, the tension among the crew intensified. Everyone aboard knew that this mission was not just another military operation, it was a reckoning. The destruction of Maya's innocent life had forged something far greater than a desire for vengeance. It had united humanity in a way that no one had ever thought possible. This was more than an attack. It was humanity's declaration of independence, a promise that they would no longer be crushed under the boot of the Empire. Admiral Hawk stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic map that projected their route through the galaxy. Every ship in the fleet, every crew member, was pushing forward with the same singular purpose. But even as the ships accelerated through the void, Hawk couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the heart of a storm that had been brewing for centuries, and one that would change the galaxy forever. The first reports of the Dreadnoughts' approach reached the Empire's warlords, and they reacted with a mixture of disbelief and anger. Humanity was not supposed to have such power. They had always been seen as weak, fragmented, and divided, easily manipulated, easily crushed. But the Empire had never faced a united humanity. They had underestimated the strength of human determination, the depth of human ingenuity. "Alert the Emperor," bellowed Lord Vroth, the Empire's most ruthless general, as he stood before his command console. His eyes, cold and calculating, flickered with a hint of concern. "Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. Humanity's reckoning is upon us." The Empire's leaders had long relied on their dominance over the galaxy, their overwhelming superiority in numbers and firepower. They had crushed entire civilizations with ease. Yet, for the first time in decades, they were beginning to question their own supremacy. Rumors of the Dreadnoughts' immense power spread like wildfire, and soon every officer, every soldier, felt the weight of doubt creeping into their minds. Could the Empire truly withstand such a force? But the Empire was not without its strength. Despite the growing fear, the Emperor's command was swift. The Imperial fleet, already spread thin across various sectors of the galaxy, was called into action. Massive warships, each one the size of a city, began to assemble in the outer reaches of the Empire's core systems. The Empire's finest ships, led by the legendary battlecruiser Volcrus, would stand ready to meet the human threat head-on. Meanwhile, aboard the Dreadnoughts, preparations were underway for what everyone knew would be a battle unlike any other. Every soldier aboard had been trained for this moment. They had been drilled in the ways of war, their minds honed to the sharpest edge. Yet, even the most experienced officers couldn't help but feel the weight of what was about to happen. This was not just another mission, it was a defining moment in history. "We're approaching the Empire's defense perimeter," Commander Mendez reported to Admiral Hawk, her voice steady despite the tension that radiated through the ship. "All systems are ready. The fleet is prepared to engage." Admiral Hawk nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Continue as planned. We don't turn back now." The fleet of dreadnoughts moved into position, their massive forms looming against the backdrop of the distant stars. The Empire's defenses had been stretched thin, spread across countless worlds and systems. Yet, even as the dreadnoughts neared the Imperial stronghold, the Empire's response was swift. The first wave of battlecruisers, the Volcrus at the lead, surged forward to meet them. The clash was inevitable, and then the first shots were fired. A volley of plasma fire erupted from the lead dreadnought, the sheer force of the blast shaking the fabric of space itself. The plasma bolts, glowing bright white against the dark expanse, streaked across the void like lightning. One of the Empire's battlecruisers, an imposing vessel of immense size and power, took the hit directly. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, in an instant, the battlecruiser erupted in a violent explosion, disintegrating into a cloud of molten metal and debris. The Empire had just lost one of its most prized ships to a single strike from a dreadnought. The devastation was unimaginable. The Imperial fleet, still reeling from the shock of the attack, retaliated in kind. Waves of energy blasts surged forward, filling the void with deadly fire. But the dreadnoughts were not so easily defeated. Their shields absorbed the blasts, and their weapons returned fire with precision and fury. The Empire's ships were no match for the dreadnoughts' firepower. Admiral Hawk's eyes never wavered from the battle unfolding on the viewscreen. She watched as her ships systematically dismantled the Empire's defenses. Each blast, each strike, was a message. This was not just a military assault, it was the manifestation of humanity's anger, its grief, and its refusal to be crushed by the Empire any longer. With each passing moment, the gap between the two fleets closed. The Empire's once pristine battlecruisers were now little more than smoldering ruins, their debris floating like grim reminders of the price of underestimating humanity. The Empire had always believed itself invincible. It had believed that no one, not even humanity, could challenge its dominance. But now, as its ships crumbled under the relentless assault of the dreadnoughts, the galaxy was beginning to see the truth. Humanity had arrived, and they would never again be overlooked. Humanity strikes back, the Empire's collapse. The battle had turned in humanity's favor, and the once mighty Empire was beginning to show signs of crumbling. Admiral Hawk's fleet of 500,000 dreadnoughts had unleashed a fury the galaxy had never seen before, and the Empire was now forced to confront the reality of what it had provoked. As the massive warships continued to devastate the Imperial fleet, the once pristine space lanes surrounding the Empire's homeworlds began to fill with the debris of their failed warships. The once untouchable strongholds of the Empire, built over centuries of conquest and bloodshed, were now under siege, vulnerable to an unstoppable tide of human firepower. No longer were they the invincible force they once believed themselves to be. Admiral Sarah Hawk stood at the heart of the battle, the glow of the strategic holomap illuminating her stern face. The number of Imperial warships in space was dwindling rapidly. Ships that had once terrorized entire star systems were now being reduced to scrap metal, their crews either fleeing in panic or perishing in the wake of humanity's wrath. The victory was sweet, but it was not yet over. The core of the Empire was still ahead. There was still much to do, and much to lose. "Admiral, we've cleared their outer defenses," Commander Mendez reported, her voice laced with awe. "The path to the Empire's capital is open. Their remaining fleet is retreating to the inner systems, but we're gaining on them." Hawk's jaw tightened, but her eyes betrayed no emotion. She had anticipated this. The Empire would not fall easily. It never did. They had the resources, the will to fight to the bitter end. But humanity had something the Empire had never understood: determination. They had something to fight for, something that no amount of power or arrogance could extinguish. And Maya's death had ignited that fire across the stars. "Continue advancing," Hawk said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're not stopping until we reach their capital. The Empire will learn what it means to lose everything they've taken for granted." As the Dreadnoughts surged forward, the last remnants of the Imperial fleet scrambled to form a defense around their homeworld. The Emperor himself, ever confident in the might of his empire, refused to believe that humanity's retaliation would succeed. His commanders, however, were beginning to falter. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy: Imperial soldiers, once proud and loyal, now questioning the unthinkable strength of the human assault. There were whispers of mutiny, of desertion, as even the mightiest Imperial generals began to doubt their emperor's rule. On the bridge of the Vulcris, the flagship of the Imperial fleet, Lord Vroth stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the unfolding battle with a mixture of disbelief and rage. His eyes flickered across the viewscreen as yet another Imperial warship was obliterated in a single strike from a human dreadnought. The destruction was overwhelming, and the once great Empire was buckling under the pressure. "This cannot be happening," Vroth muttered, his voice low but filled with frustration. "The humans are too strong. How could we not have known about these ships?" His subordinate, a young officer, nervously adjusted his uniform as he spoke up. "My lord, our fleet is being overwhelmed. Our forces are scattered, and the Dreadnoughts are continuing their advance. The Emperor demands that we hold the line, but..." "But what?" Vroth snapped, turning toward the officer. "Speak plainly, officer." The young officer hesitated, glancing at the destruction outside the ship's windows. "We can't win this. Not without reinforcements. Not with a human fleet this close." Vroth's lips curled into a thin, bitter smile. He knew the situation was dire. The Empire's forces were stretched thin, and their hold on the galaxy was rapidly slipping away. For the first time in his career, he saw it. He saw the cracks in the Empire's foundation. Humanity, with its unmatched will and its relentless pursuit of justice, had shattered the illusion of Imperial invincibility. The Emperor's grip on the galaxy was slipping, and no matter how many battles they fought, the Empire could not recover from this. Meanwhile, on Earth, the leaders of the human resistance were coordinating with the fleet, their communications lines now open to the galaxy. Earth's Council had been in constant contact with Admiral Hawk, offering their support and providing intelligence. The galaxy was watching, waiting for the final blow. "We're almost there," Commander Mendez said, her voice tense as she watched the countdown on her console. "We've reached the edge of the Imperial capital system." "Deploy the final wave of ships," Admiral Hawk ordered, her eyes narrowing with steely resolve. "Prepare for the final assault." At the heart of the Imperial capital system, the Emperor's forces were scrambling to mount a defense. Massive orbital platforms, bristling with weapons, formed a final line of defense around the capital planet, while the Emperor himself, hidden away in his palace, issued orders from his throne. His once great empire was on the verge of collapse, but he refused to admit defeat. "Gather the fleet," the Emperor's voice boomed through the halls of his palace. "We will not yield to these humans. We will show them the true power of the Empire. Every ship, every soldier will fight to the last." But even as the Emperor's forces assembled, a dark shadow loomed over the capital. The Dreadnoughts, undeterred and relentless, drew ever closer. The time had come. The first wave of dreadnoughts entered the outer defense perimeter, and the battle for the capital began. Energy blasts ripped through the vacuum of space, and the once mighty Imperial stations trembled as they were struck by the full force of human firepower. The sheer size and firepower of the dreadnoughts were beyond anything the Empire had faced. One by one, their defensive platforms were annihilated, their heavy armor no match for the concentrated fury of humanity's best warships. With each strike, the Empire's hold on the capital weakened, and as the last defense platform fell, the path to the Emperor's palace was cleared. The final confrontation was about to begin. Humanity was coming for the heart of the Empire. The final confrontation, humanity at the Empire's gates. The final assault on the Empire's capital had begun. The vast armada of 500,000 dreadnoughts surged toward the heart of the once glorious Empire, and the capital planet, shrouded in a haze of desperation, was now within their sights. The sky above the world shimmered with the light of distant explosions, and the sounds of battle echoed across the void. The Empire's defenses were failing, and their grand illusion of invincibility was shattered. Admiral Hawk stood in the command center of the lead dreadnought, Titanic, her gaze focused on the holographic projections of the capital's defense grid. The planet below was surrounded by a thick web of orbital platforms, each bristling with weapons designed to protect the heart of the Empire. But as the human fleet advanced, it became clear that the platforms would not hold for long. "Admiral, we've breached their outer defense perimeter," Commander Mendez reported, her voice cutting through the tension in the air. "We're within range of the capital's surface." Hawk nodded, her expression cold and determined. "Good. We'll break through their last line of defense, then we push for the Emperor. This ends today." A low hum vibrated through the ship as the massive dreadnoughts prepared for their final push. Every ship in the fleet was primed for the impending clash. The final battle would not be fought in space. It would be fought in the Empire's most sacred stronghold, on the very surface of the planet that had been the Empire's seat of power for millennia. Far below, on the surface of the capital planet, the Emperor sat on his golden throne, his once imposing figure now dwarfed by the mounting chaos outside. He had spent decades expanding the Empire, crushing resistance with brute force, and enforcing a reign of terror across the galaxy. Now, that reign was on the verge of collapsing, and his own people were beginning to turn against him. Whispers of rebellion had spread throughout the capital, and even his most loyal soldiers were beginning to question his rule. The Emperor had always believed that fear would keep them in line, but fear had now given way to something more dangerous: defiance. In the Emperor's war room, Lord Vroth paced back and forth, his fists clenched in frustration. The fleet was in disarray, their warships retreating in panic as the dreadnoughts continued to tear through their defenses. The Empire was losing, and they were losing fast. "We need reinforcements," Vroth growled, his voice thick with anger. "Call in every available ship from the outer sectors. The humans cannot be allowed to break through." But even as he spoke, the communications officer interrupted him, her face pale. "My lord, it's too late. The dreadnoughts are here. Their first wave has entered the atmosphere. The capital defenses are failing." Vroth's heart sank. The Empire was done. Back in space, the dreadnoughts had already begun their final descent toward the planet's surface. The battle above the capital intensified as the Empire's last remaining warships, unable to match the sheer firepower of the human fleet, continued to fall one by one. The dreadnoughts tore through the orbital defenses with ease, leaving only the ruins of Imperial pride in their wake. As the massive warships began their approach toward the surface, the atmosphere crackled with energy. The Empire's final defense, its planetary shield, had been activated, but even that was not enough. The dreadnoughts were simply too powerful, their weapons designed to overwhelm any defense, no matter how advanced. The first blast from a dreadnought's main cannon tore through the planetary shield like paper, and the surface of the capital planet was soon visible, vulnerable, exposed, and about to be irrevocably changed. Admiral Hawk's voice rang out through the fleet's comms, calm and unyielding. "Focus all fire on the Imperial Palace. We'll land in the heart of their capital and show them what humanity is capable of." The Dreadnoughts began their descent in perfect unison, each ship's landing gear deploying as the behemoths pierced through the atmosphere. The sight of these colossal warships, each one larger than a city, plummeting toward the surface sent shockwaves through the capital. The ground trembled beneath their weight, and the skies lit up with the fire of their descent. The people of the capital, who had once lived under the oppressive rule of the Empire, now watched in stunned silence as humanity's fury descended upon them. At the base of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor's personal guards scrambled to prepare for the inevitable. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Yet, they held their ground, for they had been trained to defend their emperor to the death. But even they could sense the futility of it all. The Empire's time was over. In the palace's grand hall, the emperor stood, his hands shaking as he clutched the armrests of his throne. His eyes burned with rage, but beneath it was a flicker of fear. The humans were not just storming the gates of his palace, they were storming the gates of his legacy. "They think they can defeat me," he spat, rising to his feet, his voice trembling with fury. "I will show them the true power of the Empire." But as he spoke, the ground beneath the palace trembled. The Dreadnoughts had landed. The Empire had no more time for words. It had only time for destruction. Admiral Hawk's feet hit the ground with a resounding thud as she stepped out of the Titanic. Behind her, the rest of the fleet followed, their soldiers pouring onto the surface of the capital, their boots crunching on the rubble of the once grand Imperial city. The air was thick with dust and smoke, and the echoes of distant explosions rang in the ears of every soldier. But none of them hesitated. "Move out," Hawk ordered, her voice commanding. "We take the palace. We end this now." As her troops advanced through the streets, the Imperial forces, weakened, attempted to put up a final stand. But the humans were unstoppable. They had faced down empires before. They had lost battles. But they had never lost their will. Not now. Not today. The palace loomed ahead, a symbol of the Empire's centuries of rule. But it was also a symbol of their downfall. And as Admiral Hawk and her troops closed in, the Emperor's reign, the reign that had seemed eternal, began to crumble before their eyes. The final confrontation was at hand, and it would be humanity that decided the outcome. The Emperor's last stand, a legacy in ruins. The Imperial Palace, once a grand symbol of absolute power, now lay in ruins. Towering spires of stone and steel crumbled as the last remnants of the Empire's once great military forces made a desperate, futile stand. The streets of the capital were choked with debris, and the air was thick with smoke. Humanity's dreadnoughts had landed, and that overwhelming presence was an undeniable testament to the Empire's failure to predict the wrath they had invited. Admiral Sarah Hawk's boots echoed in the silent halls of the palace as she walked forward, flanked by her soldiers. They had breached the outer defenses, pushed through the streets, and now the heart of the Empire was just a few hundred meters away. The final battle was upon them, and there was no turning back. "Stay focused," Hawk commanded, her voice sharp and resolute. "The Emperor is close. We're ending this today." Her soldiers, battle-hardened and determined, nodded grimly. Each of them had their reasons for being here, but above all, they shared one singular purpose: to bring an end to the tyranny that had claimed the lives of countless innocents. Among them, the memory of Maya, the young child who had sparked this conflict, burned bright in their minds. Her death had set in motion a chain of events that had brought them to this very moment. But as they advanced, they encountered resistance. Imperial guards, desperate to protect their emperor, lined the halls of the palace, weapons drawn. They were outmatched, but they fought with the ferocity of those who knew they had nothing left to lose. Their armor gleamed with the pride of the fallen empire, their faces grim and set in defiance. One such guard, a towering figure in dark battle armor, stood at the door to the Emperor's inner sanctum. His name was General Varric, a man who had served the Empire for decades, rising through the ranks with a singular loyalty to the Emperor. The destruction of the Empire had not broken his resolve, it had hardened it. "You will not pass," Varric declared, his voice deep and unwavering. "This palace is the heart of the Empire. No one, not even you, will desecrate it." Admiral Hawk did not flinch. She had faced greater challenges in her life, and this man, for all his strength, was nothing more than a pawn in the Emperor's fading game. "We don't want your palace," Hawk replied coldly, her eyes locking onto Varric's. "We want justice. For Maya, for every soul you've crushed beneath the Empire's heel, and for the galaxy that has suffered because of your tyranny." General Varric's expression faltered for just a moment. The weight of his actions, the lives he had taken, the orders he had followed without question, began to gnaw at him. But he quickly buried those thoughts beneath a layer of cold determination. He had sworn an oath to protect the Emperor, and that oath meant everything to him. With a roar, Varric lunged forward, his massive sword aimed at Hawk's heart. But she was faster. She sidestepped the strike, her combat training kicking in as she drew her sidearm. A single shot rang out, and Varric fell to the ground, his weapon clattering across the floor. The room fell silent, save for the steady hum of the Dreadnoughts' engines echoing from outside. The battle had reached its final stages, and the Emperor's last line of defense had crumbled. The soldiers who had stood with Varric now hesitated, their resolve beginning to fracture. They had fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. It was clear the Empire was done. Hawk turned to her troops, her face hard but resolute. "Push forward. We're almost there." As they entered the Emperor's inner sanctum, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant sounds of battle echoing through the corridors. The Emperor's throne room was vast, opulent, and intimidating. Tall columns lined the edges of the room, and the floor beneath their feet was made of polished black marble, gleaming with an unnatural sheen. At the far end of the throne room, the Emperor sat atop his golden throne, his figure casting a long shadow across the room. His once grand armor was now tarnished, his regal robes stained with the weight of his empire's collapse. The golden crown he wore seemed out of place, a symbol of a broken ruler clinging to the last remnants of power. "You've come," the Emperor said, his voice weak but still carrying a trace of arrogance. "You think you can destroy everything I've built. You think you can erase the legacy of the Empire." Admiral Hawk stepped forward, her eyes locking onto the Emperor's. "Your legacy is one of oppression, of murder, and of bloodshed. You killed an innocent child, and that was your undoing. Maya's death was your greatest mistake, and now the galaxy will finally be free of your tyranny." The Emperor's eyes flashed with anger, but it was the fear beneath that anger that was most evident. He had spent his entire life believing in the invincibility of the Empire, in the absolute certainty that nothing could destroy what he had built. Yet here he was, facing the one force capable of doing so, humanity. "I will not go quietly," the Emperor spat, rising from his throne. "You will never understand the true power of the Empire. You are nothing but insects, and I will crush you just as I've crushed every enemy before you." But Hawk was unfazed. "You've underestimated humanity for the last time." In a flash, she raised her weapon, her hand steady, her heart resolute. The final shot was fired, not out of vengeance, but out of a deep need for justice. The Emperor fell, his body collapsing to the cold marble floor. The throne room, once a place of unimaginable power, now lay silent and still. The Empire was no more. As Hawk turned to her soldiers, she saw the looks in their eyes, some of relief, others of sorrow, but all of them were resolute. The battle had been won, but at what cost? The galaxy had been saved, but the scars of the Empire's reign would remain. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, Admiral Hawk spoke, her voice calm, but filled with the weight of what had just transpired. "It's over. Humanity has won. And with that, the galaxy began to breathe again.